if she the flame in the fire. Woman, woman, she's a lover and a fighter and a king and a mother. Woman, woman, turn a boy to a man, build a whole empire. That woman got a story with a halo standing in her glory.
Paradigm shift.
Increased women in STEM fields.
Well, I've heard about the phrase. I've heard it talked about in several news areas, and I know that it's a really important topic right now.
Women have endured numerous social, economical, and political inequalities. It is because of their resilience and determination, since long before the coined first wave feminist movement in the 1970s, that women have been able to make such prominent leaps in earning their rights to education, employment, and politics.
Women have begun to say that being a second-class citizen isn't good enough anymore. And women are becoming, like I said, involved in politics, involved in all kinds of places that they haven't been involved in before. And I, for one, am feeling pretty good about that.
That woman, she's a dangerous, so holy like she's covered in that angel dust. God gave you the answer when he gave you the woman.
I think it's easier for women now. I hope it's easier for women now. I hope I plowed a field for them that they can get through easier. Because it was not fun. It wasn't fun. But I did it to prove a point.
That woman, she's a boss lady.
Miss Rainey had enlisted in the Army in 1983, shortly after the disbanding of the Women's Army Corps and the formation of the Male and Female Integrated Army, where she and her husband served simultaneously. Miss Rainey had spent nearly 22 years in the military as an officer.
At the time, I was the very first female officer in our battalion. I was the first female staff officer on a staff in our battalion. I was the first female commander in the state of Missouri. My husband and I were the first female and male married couple who were commanders in the state of Missouri. That didn't make it any easier when I became an officer. It just became harder because then I had to deal with blatant sexism. The very first day I went there and they were issuing me my uniform and they said, what size shoes do you wear? At the time I wore 7.5 and I said 7.5, so they handed me 7.5 and they were this much too big for my feet. And I said, these aren't 7.5. And they said, yes, they are. Well, they were men's 7.5. They weren't women's 7.5. They didn't have boots for me that were small enough. They knew I was coming. Uniforms were hard to get because they didn't have them small enough. And then when I was on active duty on a mail post that's infantry and armor, I had my military counterpart say to me, no woman who is a mother should wear combat boots. When people come on to you in the military, if you're a woman, you have to deliberately misunderstand because that way you don't have to fight the fight head on. You can't tell somebody that you're being sexually harassed. You can't say that because if you do, it comes back on you. So I had a guy I would stay in a hotel because I didn't live there, and this guy would, first he showed up in the hotel and he would call me. I don't know how he got my room number because that's illegal, and I would tell him, don't tell anybody my room number. I don't want anybody to know where I am. He would still call my room. Hey, do you want to meet me for a drink? No, sir. He outright to me. No, sir. Oh, no, sir, I'm not thirsty right now. Knowing full well that he didn't, or, hey, do you want to come over into my room and go over paperwork? No, sir, I'm really tired. And I had one guy one time tell me, he kept calling me sir. And I said, everybody called him Pat. He was so old that he wasn't given any jobs. And I said, Pat, I'm a female and you're supposed to call me ma'am. And he said, when did they change that, sir? And I said, when they let females into the Army And he said, okay, sir, I'll remember that. I'm like, okay. He never called me man.
As you can see, even as a highly ranked military officer, as a woman, Ms. Rainey experienced much sexism.
I had a sergeant major one time keep calling me honey, sweetie. I said, I'm not your honey and I'm not your sweetie, and that's not acceptable, and you will not call me that again. And at some point, we had to have a very frank conversation in front of our colonel because he wouldn't stop, because it was his way of keeping me down. How dare I? When I was a detachment commander in DeSoto, I had people tell me, I'm never going to call you ma'am. I'm never going to call you ma'am, because they'd never seen a female officer before. Never going to call you ma'am. And I said, I don't care. Call me lieutenant. Call me LT. Call me Lieutenant Rainey. I don't care. Don't call me a ma'am. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me. But you're going to give my rank the respect it deserves.
While Ms. Rainey was battling sexism here in the Midwest, Zara was experiencing similar injustices in the Middle East.
They are against any equality gender and feminism. Feminism is a crime in my country.
Woman, she's the balls and
In order to disrupt the movement, the Iranian government took several punitive measures.
More than 70 Iranian women's activists were arrested.
The 1977 through 1979 Iranian Revolution brought about several changes for women.
Reza Shah was a modern king and liked to modernize the country.
I've seen pictures.
Yeah.
Yes.
It includes the women. And because of that, the women access to education, and they participate in the public activity, and they, for example, they did the exercise, and then we had, on that time we had the national team of women in the
And you went to
Olympic.
university
Yeah,
and you did
we
all
had a
the
free
Yes.
free hijab, and especially in the law, for example, the minimum age of marriage increased from 9 to 18, because 9 is Islamic law. And and the women could get the right of the divorce, custody, and traveling out of the country without the
Before the revolution. Okay.
Without the permission of the husband.
Okay.
Yes, and many things. And we had many women in the parliament, as minister, as ambassadors, and they were active, especially that the second king, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, and his wife was very active for women's. And the number of the Iranian women's artists increased. But unfortunately, 79 revolution stopped all of them and pushed us back because of all of the law that means equality gender were cancelled. And now Iranian women doesn't have the right of custody, divorce, and traveling out of the country without her husband permission. And they don't, for example, that we have that a lot of violence against women.
Other issues women experienced were issues of representation.
A man is equal to woman. For example, if a woman kills a man, she will be executed. Yeah, but if a man kills a woman, and her family should pay some money to his family that if they want to execute him.
Today, Women's Day is observed all throughout Iran. Women advocate against issues such as forced marriage, marital abuse, honor killing, and various other issues. Meanwhile, here in the United States, a different kind of revolution was underway.
I know you do. You remember Margaret Mead?
Yeah.
I had an old 1970s Life magazine
Oh,
here.
yeah, I remember that.
You do.
I do.
And she's talking about the changes that have gone on. And I want to read a paragraph from it, Ms. Ango. We are having a tremendous revolution in the world of sex, but most people are talking about promiscuity or four-letter words, and they are not the point. Swings between Puritanism and license are as old as Methuselah.
I was in high school. I graduated from high school in 1979. So I was a kid during the 60s, but I do remember I remember hippies. I remember that, and I remember my parents saying that, pointing out and saying how bad you're not going to be like that, and how bad they were and stuff. But as far as the sexual revolution, I'm still waiting for my mom to talk to me about sex. So there you go. I was the very first person in my family to go to college. My mom was a secretary, and she rose to executive assistant, which is a pretty fancy name for a very fancy secretary. And my dad was a barber, and I was the very first person to go to college in my family, and nobody knew how to get me there or how to do it. But my parents raised me with the idea that I would go to college. It was never an option not to go to college because they didn't get to, so they raised me that I would. My mom wanted to go to college, but my grandfather told her that if there was anybody who was going to go to college in the family, it was going to be his son. He had 2 daughters and 1 son, and he said his son would be the one to go to college. Even though my mother was the one that should have gone.
That was probably a pretty common thing for
Yeah.
a grandparent.
In the 50s.
In the 50s.
In the 50s,
yes.
Yeah. So I was lucky.
Woman, got a whole lot of nerve, she the flame in the fire. Woman.
Well, here's the thing. St. Louis just elected their very first female mayor, which is pretty amazing and pretty groundbreaking. Consider that it's been a good old boys club since St. Louis was founded. That's pretty amazing. And I was reading an article just the other day about the fact that so many women have now decided that they want to get involved in politics, which I think can only help. Women have not had very many opportunities in history, and I think that we're right there at the beginning of a groundbreaking time